Hi, I'm Jeanette, the North Down Coach. I'm glad you're here with me as I continue the series that I started in the last video, which has been inspired, the overall series has been inspired by the news coming out of Stanford University in late July around some really pretty significant layoffs as a result of significant financial issues. And you may not know, if you're just meeting me here for the first time, that part of my career story has been that I spent 15 years at Stanford in a primarily staff facing role. And so many of the people that have been affected by these layoffs, both people who have been laid off and then people who remain and have to contend with, carrying on from this point, there are people that I know and respect and value. And so not only is that true, but it's also true that it's not the only place that is suffering through layoffs. And so I thought, as a career coach, what could I do that might be helpful? And so I thought this series of videos where we're kind of taking a look at next steps and practical things that can be done at this point that would be useful. I wanted to contribute that. So today, what we're going to look at is something that I feel is pretty foundational, and that's why I'm placing this content early on in the series, because I think it's something that needs attention early on in the process, and that is this concept of story. And I think about story from two perspectives, and we're going to look at both of them today. The first perspective that comes up is around the context of the story that we tell ourselves. And this is not just about layoffs, but it's, in response to any particular set of, objective facts that come in. We then take those facts and attach meaning to them. And then, emotional energy and, things that can be negative and anxiety and that kind of thing associated with how we interpret the particular events or the particular facts of the events. And so in this particular situation of layoff, I think that it's really important in the very beginning of this process to start to look objectively at what's happened, because I think that we have a tendency in the receiving of the bad news of the layoff, that if you're the recipient of that news, to receive it from a very reactive perspective, because of course this news is being delivered. You're not choosing that. And then to start to feel, the natural emotions associated with this wasn't what I wanted, the grief, the anger, maybe uncertainty about the future. All of those things are legitimate things to feel. And then it's time to also look at the circumstances and think about it in a proactive story lens. So this has happened. There's nothing that can change that. And now, how can we take this situation and, what's that expression? Take lemons and make lemonade. In other words, like, how can we shape this into a proactive, future-oriented, moving in the direction that you want, even if it seems very challenging? I'd offer that this is an important mindset shift to work on early in the process, because when we can start to feel the positive energy of the opportunity that lies in something that you didn't choose, right? But there is still opportunity in this change to pivot, to, transition in a direction that will serve you. That part of the story is a really important aspect to focus on. The other part, the second part of story that I think is really important, is the story that you are going to, as you move into next steps associated with, a career pivot, interviewing for jobs that are, logically in line with what you've been doing, whatever the thing is that you're going to do next, you need a story And I'm not saying a made up story. I'm saying you need a narrative around what has transpired. And what I would offer in the particular situation of the Stanford layoffs is that the whole world doesn't necessarily know what led up to this situation. Particularly if you're thinking about making a pivot out of higher ed and into some other sort of industry, there may be a lack of awareness on the part of recruiters and hiring managers around the particular financial challenges to higher ed institutions at this time. And without that story, without the awareness around it, um, hiring managers or recruiters could come up with other stories around what happened. For instance, a false idea of what happened is, oh, Stanford wanted to get rid of, performance issues, underperformers that just weren't doing well. I can tell you that that is, from looking at the people who are a part of this process, that is so far from the truth. These are high performing individuals that have been caught in this. And so in the telling of the narrative, in how you're writing the cover letter, how you're approaching networking conversations, that educational piece, which is kind of funny because it's higher ed, but what I mean by educational is providing that additional context around kind of what led to the challenges from a financial perspective that brought about such dramatic need for layoffs. Of course, the hiring teams may be aware of this, but they may not, because they may be focused on other things that are going on in industry. So being able to give a little bit more context around that story so that it's clear that really the opportunity for the next hiring team, the next hiring manager, is to really get a win out of this. If you're the person being laid off, the advantage to the hiring team that's looking at you is, wow, they're getting a real gem that would not have been available except for these really extreme circumstances. So both parts of the story are important. Of course, foundationally, your mindset and how to turn those lemons into lemonade. And then secondly, how you're telling that story as you move into next phases in the search. Now, I know that's easier said than done. So if you'd like a little bit of a boost of thinking about your particular situation and how that might apply, please reach out. I will put a link to a free, no strings attached career strategy 45-minute session. Be happy to talk through what your particulars are and think about how your story could be developed, even if you're not part of the Stanford layoff process. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back next time with another topic in this continuing series. Take care.